Hi, this is Billy Cordts. I'm going to be talking today about my lesson used for our little mini TPA assignment for our 606 class. Um, for this assignment, I chose a lesson in our geology unit on the rock cycle and rock formation. So, a little brief overview. Obviously, in TPA with the TPA, the Danielson TPA, or just planning lessons, it's really important that you think about your planning, think about your students both individually and as a class, kind of how you're going to assess them, how you can reflect and build. So for me, I really, as often as I possibly can, try and use backward design. The idea is looking at unit exams or thinking about exactly what I want my students to know, meeting the objectives and the standards provided. And knowing what those are, now I can work backward and figure out exactly, build a plan to help me reach those students and for those students to reach their goals. Again, both students with IEPs and the class as a whole. And then from there, you can modify as needed. So my lesson is the rock cycle and rock formation using crayons. So you would shave with a coin crayons to create sediment. And the students would have some background, prior knowledge about the vocabulary. We also reinforced this with a great recreation video about the rock cycle and how it's created in our on our planet and how rock works and the breaking down of sedimentary rock, how pressure creates sedimentary rock, how heat and pressure combine create metamorphic rock, and how cooling magma creates igneous rock. So with that in mind, our lesson, as always, in a lab setting is based on groups, and we have groups and we had stations. So students would move, they would shave and create the sediment of different colors and pour it into an aluminum foil envelope that we created. And then we would press to create the sedimentary rock. And we would observe and answer questions, and then we would move on and we would add heat using hot water and press to create metamorphic rock. And again, open it up, observe, take a look, see what we created, answer some questions about how that connects to the things that we know, using our scientific vocabulary, which is key. So practicing all these things, I thought that the lab would be very successful, which it was. As for my target learner, for the video's sake, I'm going to call my target learner Malachi. Malachi is classified emotionally disturbed, but also has some academic struggles. He's a bit quirky. He has a tendency at times to struggle in groups. But he's bright and he's inquisitive and he has a lot of knowledge outside of what we're learning. He watches a lot of scientific TV and reads a lot of that kind of stuff. But as I mentioned, he does have emotional issues and he tends to be very distracted at times or off task, or he can get emotional. So it was important for me to keep an eye on him. A couple of modifications that I did for Malachi. There could also be a modification. I have another student with some physical disabilities where they struggled to use the coin, and we would use a pencil sharpener instead. There's less fine motor skill needs there, I'm sorry. So to create that sediment, it also creates different size sediment, which is more natural in our actual environment. So for Malachi, I also created a checklist, a physical checklist that would go with Malachi wherever he was. And he would check in with me, and I would see that he'd completed. Obviously, I was keeping an eye on him as well as manning the hot plate. So the modification worked really well for him. I also modified his exam in where instead of having 4 multiple choice answers, I would have 3 multiple choice answers, or possibly more of a fictitious answer. So it narrowed down his options for answering those questions. There were no changes to the matching section or the other section, and he actually fared very well. As for the learning need, I'm sorry, not the learning need, the safety hazard that I foresaw, obviously using the hot plate is not always ideal with 7th graders, and it went really well. we've reinforced the rules. The students know the rules. We had all the proper safety equipment. So using the hot plate to heat the water, I then transferred that water to an aluminum pan. And the students were able to use tongs and safety gloves to place their aluminum foil envelope into the water for the allotted amount of time, depending on whether it was metamorphic or igneous rock, and take it out, wait for it to cool, and observe. And there were no issues, so I was very happy about that. Malachi did very well. He does struggle with management and transition needs, so that checklist was really helpful for him. On top of the modification for the checklist and the assessment, I also really reinforced the whole concept with that video to start out with. I really try and use visual aids as much as possible. That whole idea of, I read or I hear and I forget, I see, I remember, and I understand. So by practicing that concept, by designing backwards where I'm really working to meet the objectives and the standards, it's really been great for me. So the whole experience was stupendous. I enjoyed the process. In reflection, I think there were a couple of things that I would do differently. Maybe more groups so that more students could get truly hands-on. But overall, I think it was really successful. Thanks for the opportunity.